Whatever tunes your knees to mush, they hit the lift. Even if you gotta sift through the shit to get to the twist, the smile I hide like it's your very last line. You'll never get another try. Do it loud, do it for the loud, for the here and now.
All right. We were very young and in our interest in Bigfoot. We used BFRO as a reference, and we came across a report that was not too far from our place in the Kaimishi Mountains. It actually had a map. The guy was so conscientious, he made a map of exactly where he had his encounter, which was not 12 miles from our place. So we decided to camp up there one night, and just naive and not thinking anything would ever transpire, we cooked bacon and eggs, and we watched a movie in our tent on a little DVD player, and later on that night, Darla had to go out and use the bathroom, and she went across the road, and by the time she crossed the road and got into the woods, which is just a few yards away from our tent, she heard this tone whistle that spooked her really bad, and she came back in the tent, and at that point we thought that's something that she's never heard, and I took her word for it. And the next day we went down and we got some Jiffy peanut butter and bungeed it up to a tree that she thought was near the source of the whistle. And we had to leave that weekend. We only came up on the weekends. And the next weekend when we came up, the Jiffy jar was gone, and the Jiffy label had been torn in perfect increments and laid down at the base of that tree. And, the dexterity, I couldn't even do that. It was, just half-inch increments of this Jiffy label. And we searched around for the jar and the lid, and we eventually found it was only like 30 yards away from that tree, and it was like it went through a dishwasher. It was that clean. And from that point on, we made a point not just to camp, but just to set bait up there, peanut butter, Jiffy peanut butter, and apples. And it got to the point where it was such a consistent behavior on the creature's part to get the. Well, actually, what I did is I'd open up the peanut butter, take that seal off, that silver seal, dip it into the peanut butter, and slap it up against the pine tree above where I bungeed the peanut butter, so at least he'd have the scent. And then I'd screw the lid on real tight, and we'd leave. And then we'd come back the next weekend, and we'd find it, exact same scenario. Top was off, find the jar. I've probably got between 40 and 50 jars of Jiffy peanut butter that I've collected over the 2-year period that we did research up there, and we just got desensitized to it. It was just a normal thing. It was a habituated animal or creature. At first, he was chipping it or snapping it off. I don't know how he did it, with his teeth or with his fingernail. They're so immensely powerful. It really really wouldn't matter. But at first, the first couple of weeks that we left peanut butter there, or weekends, we'd find the lid and it was snapped. But evidently, he got to the point where he was probably observing me unscrewing it and screwing it on, and he noticed the motion, and probably 3 weeks into it, we started finding the lids, and they weren't snapped anymore. They were unscrewed, and we just figured that he had figured it out. You know, he'd figured out to unscrew it instead of just snapping it off. Well, from that point on, we just figured he was observing us. It got to the point where we're being watched, but we can't see him, and we just came to that conclusion that we're being observed, and you know, time went by, and certain things occurred, like there was a time frame where we didn't find any peanut butter jars within that 30, 40-yard radius, and you know, we were dumbfounded. We just figured maybe he left. So I went. There's a creek down there called Buffalo Creek, and I used to fish in it, and it's about a half a mile from the bait station. And we went down there, and I got out of the truck and started fishing. And Darla takes our dog and walks the opposite way, so our dog doesn't get in the way of my fishing. And she found a little catch of peanut butter jars, like 5 peanut butter jars piled up by a tree. Where, in other words, it looked like he was sitting there eating the peanut butter and then going down to the creek and getting a drink. I mean, that's what we put together. And
so it looked like, since it was about a half-mile walk, that it would take the peanut butter from your station and
right.
clean out the jar on his way to the creek, and that's where he would leave the jars to get him a drink, probably.
Right. And they were just piled up on the base of this tree, like a half a mile from our original bait station. I mean, who knows? He may have figured out how to drink out of one of those jars. You know, that's speculation, but.
Well, you know, I do remember reading a report a long time ago where somebody witnessed a Bigfoot that had an old metal lunchbox. You know, one of those tin lunchboxes that kids take to school, and it saw it dipping water out and drinking with it.
No kidding. Well, there it is. I mean, that may have been the case, and honestly, I have to say, neither one of us have ever seen that creature. Everything's like, it's just things that he had done that kept us interested and kept us baiting and habituating him over the year, or over the 2-year time span. But we never did see it. And what happened was, just last year, Warehouse came in and logged that area, and pretty much, I'm sure, drove him off, just because the trees aren't thick in there anymore. There's no cover for him anymore. They're really cleared out, and I'm sure he's gone to another area, or but we've pretty much vacated that research area, and Darla's actually found another spot a long ways away from there, and he was so habituated to us, and I think he heard the sound of my little Nissan truck coming up the mountain, and back then it took a 4-wheel drive truck to get up it, and my truck's an older truck, so I think it was like Pavlov's dogs. He'd hear my truck, and he knew, here comes the peanut butter, and so he got ready to be, in a place where he could observe us, and but anyway, when we were camping, we camped up there again, and this is probably a year into our research, and I said, I'm going to tie some of this 12-pound monofilament line to my peanut butter jar, and then take my spool and just run it. It's basically invisible, okay, and take it and run it to a branch above our tent and tie it off to the branch above our tent. And 11 o'clock that night, we were watching another movie on a little 7-inch DVD, and I hear this boom, boom, and it was the branch came down and slapped the top of our tent just in a nanosecond, like he just snatched that peanut butter jar off that tree, and he was gone. But whatever the concept was.
So there was no toying with it. There was no toying. It was a snatch and grab and run.
Yeah, it was instantaneous, and I said, hey, well, I was just thinking it worked, but you have to, you'd have to have a creature habituated enough to do that, to do that, and we were fortunate enough to have one that did that. Yeah, I mean, we were laying these little gala apples out there, but the raccoons we could tell those raccoons because they'd eat them, and they'd only eat like half of one, and they'd be done with it. And so I decided in our second bait station, which was like a half mile away, I built a rock pile and made sure that the inside of it could accommodate 3 little gala apples. And these rocks were big and heavy, and so to keep the raccoons out. And put the gala apples in there, and obviously we were being observed again. Put 3 of them in there, came back the next weekend, and looked at the rock pile, and the rock pile was still intact. And I go, well, I guess he didn't see them. And just out of curiosity, I took one of the big rocks off and looked down in there, and they were gone. So what he did is he tried to make himself look like I hadn't been here.
Yeah.
He took the apples and replaced the rock, and it's just one of the things that amazes me about the stealthiness and the conscience. They have such a conscience about them.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it weird though that they would be aware and conscious of putting the rock back where it was, but not realizing that the 3 apples gone wouldn't tell you that they were there.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a weekly. We got desensitized to that too. It was just a weekend. Every weekend we do it, and every time we came back, the rock pile would be intact, and the gala apples would be gone. And I'll say this. Speaking of the gala apples, they're kind of small. Even for us, they're considered a small apple, but for them, these huge creatures, they're probably just a tidbit. Well, we've never caught any creature on video, but we had a game camera set up in that same exact spot, aiming at the rock pile, and we got the game camera had audio capabilities, and we were running the SD card, and we hear this on audio. We hear this snap. In other words, he probably just popped one of those gala apples in right behind the camera, because the camera, you have to be relatively close to the camera to have audio, and you just heard him. He bit down on an apple, and you hear him munching with his mouth open. And,
and fortunately for me, I was able to hear that video, and I thought it was pretty wild. I mean, it sounded just like you and I would eat an apple.
Exactly, but
and almost like he was moaning in pleasure while he was eating.
Yeah, I got the same opinion about that. Actually, on the same, I think the same audio was Darla recorded the ape type noises, and then she compared it with other animal noises, and it sounded just like a chimp. Deep into our research, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, we came driving up there like we normally do. Went to go check we knew the peanut butter would be gone. Walked to the tree, and at the base of the tree was a big green marble. It's like, thank you, within the perimeter of our tree that we bungeed it to. Real easy to find. And so, just like any other weekend, we pulled up, went to go find our peanut butter jar, found the peanut butter jar, found the lid, and I'm just walking back to the truck, screwing the lid on, and it wouldn't screw on, and it was just kind of unconsciously trying to make it twist on, and it wouldn't go on. I just handed it over to Darla, and she tried to do it, and she couldn't twist it on, and she got to looking at it. And what we had done the weekend before that is we forgot to get the peanut butter, so we had to go down the mountain, go down to this little mountain country store, and get this off-brand peanut butter. And what happened was, I guess, it's just speculation, but I'm thinking he always brought the peanut butter jars back to make sure that we give him a new one. Well, he brought the jar back, but the lid was from that off-brand, so it wouldn't screw onto the Jiffy jar. And it just, it kind of illustrated to me and Darla that he tried to get it back to us, right? But he mixed up the lids.
So what do you think about this scenario? Remember the stash of empty peanut butter jars down by the creek, which is half a mile away. So is this a likely scenario? In order for him to mix the lids up, that means he had to have had it sitting with other jars in order to mix the lids up.
That's something that we thought about too. It's like
so he must have walked down to the creek, did his business, finished up the peanut butter, knowing that he needed to bring one back up the mountain and put it back, and he just grabbed the wrong lid for it.
Yeah, that could have been the correct scenario, but we were just tickled that he's in panic mode. I got to get the lid and the jar back so I get my peanut butter next weekend, and he just mixed up the lids. But
with the time that I've spent with Rick and them, it's hard not to feel, and most habituators, I believe, feel this way because of the time invested with their particular creature. And you can actually feel this from Rick that they had established a sort of kinship or a sort of relationship with this one particular animal, so you kind of grow fond of it. And now you're going to hear a story that pretty much ended that relationship, and that caused Rick and Darla some trouble.
Well, it did. It all goes back to it was later in our research time that we spent up there. It was probably close to our 2-year mark, and for about a month, nothing was taking our peanut butter. There wasn't anything taking our peanut butter, and we knew that there had to be a red flag there. There's something wrong. He's left for whatever reason, but we still came up and checked our peanut butter every weekend that we went up there. We checked, and it was still bungeed to our tree. And then one weekend, she noticed about probably 30, 40 yards from this is our secondary research area, like a half a mile from our main one. She noticed a tree pushed down, about a 6-inch live maple tree pushed over. And Randy, I stood in those. You could see where he stood and torqued down on that back foot, and the whole floor of the pine forest, there was just nothing but pine needles. So you could see where he torqued down in that back foot because he piled up some pine needles where he torqued down. And
now we don't want to mislead the listeners. These things weren't just bent over; these things were snapped. I mean, they were broken at 4. Yeah. When you're standing on the downhill side, it was probably 4 or 5 feet high. They were completely broken over, and they were 6-inch diameter trees.
Yeah, and they had green leaves on them, so they happened between our weekends. In other words, we did notice it one weekend, and came back and noticed it the next, or she did. And I stood in those footsteps. I put my foot in the back footprint and put my left foot in the front footprint and put my arm out, and I was still about 4 feet away from the tree. In other words, that's how much longer and massive their arms are than and I'm a regular-sized guy. So we thought, well, that's, we just figured, we speculated that was like a show of power. It was just pure speculation. But the next weekend, not 10 feet away from that tree, another 6-inch maple was pushed over. And we're thinking...
Now, did they both point towards the baiting area?
No, they were pushed over opposite of the baiting area.
So they were pointing away. Okay.
They were pushed uphill. And the only thing we could surmise is some other creature came in and said, okay, watch out, I'm here now, and this is what I can do. And then the next weekend when we discovered the other 6-inch maple pushed over, exactly the same. Leaves are green, snapped, same height. Maybe the original guy said, "Well, I can do that too." Maybe. Like I said, it's just
that's a pretty interesting take on what happened there. But for our listeners, we can tell them, it's easy for us, that know these creatures are out there to try to wrap a nice little package around their activities and their behavior so that we can kind of get an idea of what's going on. But for this particular activity, even though you speculate, it looks like another one came in there and pushed those trees over, and it was showing how strong it was, and was showing its force and its size and its strength, and that would be a good guess. But you have more evidence that would suggest that this is indeed the fact of what happened.
I do. Like I said, for a month or so, we just didn't have any activity taken, peanut butter jars being taken. And then after those 2 trees were pushed over, I think it might have been the very next weekend, our peanut butter jar was gone. And we got all excited again, and he's back. Everything's going to be okay. But when we discovered the lid in the jar, the lid was snapped off. In other words, the old creature, our first creature, knew how to unscrew it. I mean, every single lid we found was unscrewed. There was no snapping of it. That
after the first initial 2 or 3 times.
Oh yeah. He had to probably observe me doing it a few times. Well, this next time when the peanut butter jar finally was taken, and we found the lid, it was snapped, and everything kind of came into making sense. Like, maybe that really is what happened. We got a new creature. It doesn't know how to unscrew a jar, but they're obviously so massive and strong they can just pop it off with their fingernail or their jaw or whatever. And for like 3 weeks, we'd find the peanut butter jar and the lid was snapped. And then I think after a month, I found a lid and it was unscrewed. And maybe that was the time frame it took him to observe us unscrewing it and screwing it back on. Who knows? But it was unscrewed. It wasn't snapped. And so it learned there's an easier way to get that lid off. And from that point on, the peanut butter jars are always unscrewed. But it wasn't long.
The extent of your activity after that was never as full as the activity that you had before that, right?
Right, exactly. It wasn't. And what contributed to that was the Weyerhaeuser started painting trees up there. Trees. When they paint a tree orange, that's a tree that's going to stay. Everything else goes. And they started painting trees. And then about a year and a half after that, they actually started logging up there, and that kind of ended everything. Ended all. We just decided that, he's not going to. Well, actually, when they started painting the trees, that's when we lost activity from that. I guess the new creature, and
Well, I can see how that would be kind of disheartening as much time and effort you put into that area, and then have that one that y'all almost felt friendly with, and then having pushed out by a possibly younger, more stout, more aggressive one that was more wild and more afraid to just take the peanut butter, but not interact in a way that the other one wasn't afraid to.
Yeah, like an adolescent or something like that. That's I surmise that might have what happened, but who knows what the real truth is. But it's a logical summarization that our older creature got pushed out, and this new guy was a little naive in the beginning with the peanut butter jars, but he figured it out. But at the same time, it was bad timing because Weyerhaeuser was starting to paint trees, and that kind of activity, I'm sure, is something that the creature doesn't like. I'm going to mention a couple other things just real quick. We had a small expedition just below our mountain, not probably half a mile or so down our mountain, and by a creek. And we didn't have any activity that night. We didn't have any activity. Well, the next day, I didn't know there was a creek there all this time until we had that expedition. And the next day, me and Darla went up there, and I wanted to fish in that creek. So Darla took Molly, our Labrador, and she always walks the opposite way because otherwise Molly will jump in the water. So she walked the opposite way, and I started fishing.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is me interjecting in 2025 into this interview from 2010. He described a whistle, and it is the exact same whistle that I got in 2015 during the bluff charge up by Mount St. Helens. So I'm going to play it so that you can compare it to what he just said.
Fishing for like 15 minutes, and I hear this distinct, just like you're standing next to me. I go, just a regular whistle. And I go, I'm right here. And I just kept fishing at the shore of the creek. And I go, well, he's right here. He's right across the creek from me, because it was that close. And
now, when you think about that whistle, Rick, did you ever talk about Darla's first, when she went to use the restroom that one night and had the same whistle with her? Was it anything close to what she heard?
No, she described it as like a four-toned whistle with a vibration in it, and with like some anxiousness to it also. Now, this is just a regular whistle, just like you and I can whistle. It's just like that. And it was so close, that's why I said, I'm right here. And then it just occurred to me, like, wait a minute, she doesn't know how to whistle, and I look over to my right, and they're just about out of sight. And then on a different creek called Buffalo Creek, I was fishing one day. Same scenario, Darla and Molly went one way, and I started fishing down this creek, and it was, I'd probably been fishing for 30, 40 minutes, and cast out. And as soon as my bait hit the water, a rock hit right next to my bait. Not a huge rock, but a rock probably the size of a baseball. And it came from the other side of the creek. And I said, well, if you don't want me here, I'm leaving. I wasn't scared, but I just took it as these are my fish, or this is my area, and I just headed back to the truck.
See, you're so nice, Rick. I'd have started wading in the water and daring it to throw another rock, and that's where you and I are different. That's why you have such great activity. You're so nice.
In retrospect, right now, I'd probably do that. I probably would. And I didn't tell you, right before that happened, right maybe 3 minutes before that happened, 3 small bucks came from the other side of the creek, and on a half gallop across the creek. There was a drought up there that year, and it was real shallow. And 3 of them right in a row. They weren't 30 yards from me. They didn't even look at me. I was standing right there, and they crossed the creek and went in behind me.
So that was right. That was before the rock got thrown.
Yeah, right before the rock, like 3 minutes before the rock got thrown.
Oh, well, you know what it sounds like to me. You know what it sounds like to me? He was probably after those 3, or at least one of those 3, and all of a sudden
I'm in the way.
You were in the way, and they went by you, and he couldn't. And
that makes sense.
Rock at you.
That makes sense. I never put it in perspective like that, but yeah, you're blocking me. I got to get by, and the only way I can get by you, you're going to see me. So I messed up his meal time, I guess. I never thought about it in those terms, but you're right. I just figured they were scared and, trying to get out of his area. But
so he chucked that rock at you.
Yeah, he chucked the rock.
He got you out of there.
Yeah, he got my attention, and I left. But I wasn't scared or anything. I don't know if it was the young one or the new one or or old guy or what, but I just was respectful, basically. I just said,
yeah, you know,
I'm leaving.
I think that behavior is probably going to be more conducive for you, you know, to have better interactions with them. It's just that, you know, they still need to do what they need to do, and if they need you to slip on out of there because they need to do something, and they toss some rocks your way and try to get you out of there, if you respectfully, you know, extricate yourself from the area, it's probably going to open you up to better interaction with them because they know that you're kind of giving them the space that they want.
Yeah, the respect part.
Yeah.
I've been like that with everything in life, and just I'm fortunate like that. I guess I've been exposed enough to bad stuff to know that the secret to interacting with anybody, any individual, any animal is respect. And
yeah.
But you got a rock thrown at you too, though.
Yeah. I mean, are you talking about the one that when me and my wife were in the vehicle?
Right.
Yeah. That one surely had a different meaning because we had been in there for a while, so it's not anything like we'd moved into his area and gotten his way or anything. This one was, won't y'all come out and play, or was that a pretty girl I saw in there, or something to that effect.
Me and you both know that we know where that area is, and it is so densely vegetated that how to throw a rock through that is just virtually impossible. So you have to be right on the edge of the woods to clear all that stuff. And if you're right on the edge of the woods, that means you're within feet of you, the vehicle.
Well, first we need to tell the listeners that Darla had found this area on her own. She'd been actively sitting out at night in different locations till she found a pretty active location, and then she shared that with me, and I certainly appreciate that because, you know, I'm so far away.
Right.
You know, it's hard for me to spend the kind of time that you guys have to even find a good spot. So when you guys establish a spot and you say, hey, Randy, you know, you're welcome to come down here and sit for a night and see what happens, you don't know how much I appreciate that.
Oh.
And so anyway, so Darla had found that spot, and she'd been recording, and I'd like to fill in, you know, with our listeners, she had some awesome recordings from that dead-end logging road down by the little river, right. And I mean, she had something happen one night that just really blew my mind, and all she had was an audio. She was sleeping in her vehicle with the windows cracked, and she had audio just sitting on top of the vehicle. And
it's your parabolic connected to a mic.
Well, I hadn't given it to y'all yet.
Oh, you hadn't? It was just her little recorder.
Yeah, this is the one where the thing was pacing on the other side of the wood pile and then jumped it.
Oh, okay. I thought she had the parabolic mic that you gave us.
No, she just had the recorder sitting on top of the vehicle, and okay. you can hear something walking through the woods, and the way this road is maintained is somebody comes in there and cuts wood that seems to fall across the road or whatever, and just tosses it off to the side, so that you end up with this long row of cut wood that just lays on the side of the road. It's almost like a berm.
Right.
And well, anyway, so this creature or animal or whatever, you could hear it pacing on the other side of this wooden berm of wooden chunks of wood, and then you hear this distinct sound of whatever it is. And this berm has to be 8 foot wide by 4 foot tall. I mean, it's a good sized wooden pile.
Pile of wood, right.
Whatever it is, you hear it jump it, because all of a sudden you hear it. You know, you can tell when something is launching out of the duff on the ground, and when it landed, I mean, it makes a distinct sound. So something jumped that wood pile and walked up to her vehicle and was sniffing around, and you could hear it sniffing around the vehicle.
Yeah.
And that was an awesome recording, and that's why I slept there a few nights, because of that recording.
Right. Yeah, my wife has got so much activity, I can't even begin to tell you, you know, there's just so much, and it's definitely a family, because distinctly one of those recordings with your parabolic mic that you gave us, they're using their voices as location, and you can hear. First of all, it's the mom or baby. It's the mom. No, it's the dad. It's the dad. It's the male, and he you hear this, and there's just no way I can ever replicate that. It's deepest, just so like 2, 3, 4 bulls together chiming at the same time, going and then you hear, and it's a little higher pitched. That's mom, and then you hear, and then in a different direction, and then you hear, like I'm here, I'm right over here. In other words, I'm almost positive that they're trying to make sure everybody knows, or Dad knows where everybody else is at. The mom.
That is cool. Well, hey, Rick. You know, when I took my wife down there and we slept in that same spot in my wife's Explorer, and
right.
I had my thermal camera up, and I had always used my thermal camera sticking up out of the tent or out of the vehicles that I was sleeping in, and never really had a whole lot of progress using it that way. So I tried something different this time. I set the camera away from the vehicle on a tree, watching the vehicle. So I wasn't moving the camera like I normally do, which I'm certain is what sets them off to knowing that there's something up when they see this camera moving. So
right.
This was the first time I had it sitting on a tree, stationary, pointed towards the vehicle. Well, anyways, we had activity that night. I mean, it probably wasn't within 30 or 40 minutes of getting in the vehicle and settling down. I had my parabolic on, and I'm hearing stuff coming around. And I tell my wife she's nervous Nelly, and she don't want to hear if there's anything out there. And
she didn't have headphones on?
No.
She didn't?
No. There's no way she'd survive a night like that.
Oh, man.
But anyway, and then all of a sudden, I hear a rock hit the vehicle. I mean, you hear it. You know what it sounds like when a rock hits the vehicle.
Right.
Just chunk. And I was like, wow. I said, it's here. I said, something is here. I said, it just hit the vehicle with a rock. Later that week when I was at home looking through the thermals, I recorded all night long, we found where 2 rocks were thrown. And we could see where it was coming from, and you could see one completely glance across the hood. And when I saw that video, I went out into the driveway, and I looked at my wife's vehicle, and I looked at the hood trying to find that spot where a rock would have glanced off of it, and I believe I found that spot at a little angle, and it put a little chip in the paint. But it's a good video of a rock being thrown from about, it looks like it's, from the 6 to 7 foot, range off the ground. It's coming in straight flat.
Yeah.
And like you were skipping a rock on water.
Oh, okay.
Also, there was a second rock thrown. It never hit the vehicle, so I never heard it with my parabolic. I only saw it with the thermal camera, but it came from the exact same area that the one that hit the hood came from, and it went over the top of the vehicle and hit the tree on my wife's passenger side and then dropped straight to the ground. So there was 2 rocks thrown, but only one hit the vehicle. So, I mean, we know that's their behavior. This was the first time I ever had it documented, and the rock appeared to be white, which means that it was holding heat when it was thrown. So that tells,
for a while.
Yeah, that tells me that it was in somebody's hands for a while.
I was going to say, you want to mention that night that me, you, and Darla...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, now, this was the first time you ever got to use a parabolic, that way.
Correct.
And I had an extra parabolic. I always have 2 or 3 of them, And anyways, so me, Rick, and Darla were going to go down to that same spot where the rocks hit my vehicle, and Darla had the thing jump the wood pile, and she's had activity all the time down there. And so we went down there, and we were sitting in lawn chairs, and I set a parabolic up on the vehicle, and we sat on one side of the vehicle with a parabolic pointing towards the woods where Darla believes the activity comes from.
The swampy woods.
Yeah, the swampy woods. And so we're just sitting there, and I had a splitter on my parabolic so that we all 3 had headsets. So we're just sitting there in lawn chairs listening, and I promise you, it wasn't 15 minutes or even less.
No, it was less.
15 minutes or less when we were sitting in those chairs, all of a sudden you could distinctly hear something tromping through the woods coming into our direction. And we kept looking at each other, and we were like, are we hearing what we're hearing? Is there something coming towards us? And it sounds like a person walking in the woods, but, I mean, it didn't take them that long to head our way.
It was you in the front of the driver's side, Darla in the middle, and me in the back. And I was thinking, God, I'm glad he's up there in the front because it was just getting closer and closer. And pretty soon, you just broke down and said, "I'm getting the bear spray out." And then, you know, he evidently got close enough to see your vehicle, and instead of, you know, advancing any further forward, he was going back and forth, like, checking us out. But it was the footsteps were just so prominent. You could hear him go through the water, splish splash through the water.
Yeah. And, and one time we heard what we thought was either a footfall on the gravel road that we had come in on, or a rock hit the gravel. Because remember, there were a couple times where we were like, "Did you hear that? That sounded like gravel. Like maybe something was stepping into gravel." And that's why we were looking down the road that we were on, because it was a gravel road.
Right. Yeah, I remember.
And what a great night!
Let me bounce in here real quick, guys. On the two thermal videos that Randy has that we all have on the link page, the 2012 Memorial Thermals Broken Bow 050 AVI, if you'll go to the 6-minute, 20-second mark, the rock flies in and skips off the hood. And then on the 052 AVI, it actually is at 8 minutes, 11 seconds, and you'll see the rock fly over the vehicle and hit the tree. So, just for everybody, yeah, come from the exact same direction and everything. So that gives everybody a reference so you can kind of go through the video a lot faster.
And that's one indication that tells me that particular setup, at least it was effective then, and that's why I'm adding a 10-foot extension to my thermal camera right now. I'm thinking if I can put that sucker another 10, 15 feet up in a tree and further back and take it in a bigger area, we might run a good chance of catching one of these creatures. I think if I would have been further back in the woods with my camera and a little higher, I think I would have caught this one that was throwing the rocks. But for some reason, he just got lucky and just missed getting at least. I bet you he wasn't 2 foot away from having his arm at least swing into the view of the camera when he threw that rock.
It's so thick in there that he had to be right on the edge to clear all that. In order for that rock to even get through all that stuff, he had to be right on the edge, which is the edge of the woods is just feet from your vehicle.
Right. Yeah. They can't be too deep into the woods throwing these rocks. Or it would be deflected by too many branches and leaves and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, their stealthiness is just it just staggers my imagination how stealthy they are, and it's almost like stealth is not the right adjective to use. It's like there's got to be something super stealth, whatever word that would be. And when we first started going up to the Kiamichis years and years ago, and I told you about that place we deemed Shangri-La, that cove.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I lead into that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Put everybody in.
Yeah.
Well, Rick told me about this. He and Darla ride four-wheelers, and this is before they even bought their cabin there. They're just riding four-wheelers on the north end of Broken Bow Lake, and they found this secluded cove that they called Shangri-La because it was just so lush and tropical and picturesque. It was just a beautiful, beautiful cove that they would walk their way into once they would get off the four-wheelers. And they got this all recorded on a VHS recorded. Anyways, and he was watching this, and it occurred to him that this is way before Bigfoot ever came on his or Darla's radar about any kind of activity. And this is one thing that I want to make sure that we bring up to especially new researchers, that you have to pay attention, because here we have a video that Rick and Darla are coming into a cove, and we'll let him describe it, but they thought all this activity that was happening around them was bear And
exactly.
when you listen to it, you know that it's probably not a bear, but still you have to listen to him tell the story.
Well, we'd discovered that there was a lot of four-wheeling available in the Kiamichi Mountains at the time. It hadn't been leased out like it is now. The land's all leased now, and you have to be a lease member. But at the time, this probably was 10 years ago, we just park our truck and take off on our four-wheeler and take four-wheel trails down wherever they took us. And we went down this one four-wheel trail. Excuse me. It was rugged. It was real rugged. But it opened up to a place that was just gorgeous. It was worth the work getting down there. It was a cove of a finger of Broken Bow Lake. On one side was just sheer rock cliffs, and the other side was like a steep small mountain or big hill. And I had videotaped all the way down that rugged trail, and then getting off our four-wheeler. I had a fishing pole in my hand and a pistol and my camcorder. And as soon as we got into that the open part of that cove, there was a big pile of scat. I mean log scat, human scat. But at the time, I even you can hear me clearly say, "Man, there's a big bear around here, honey." Because I knew what hog scat looked like, but I didn't know what bear scat looked like. So I just assumed it was a bear, and I videoed it, and then I handed the camcorder over to Darla, and she filmed me walking towards the lake and walking towards the cove, and I was going to fish. And I hadn't even got to the cove yet to fish, and she goes, "Did you hear that snap? It sounded like somebody snapped an arm." You got to remember, we were just, in our minds, Bigfoot only existed in the Northwest at the time. That we were just that naive. And I said, you could hear me say, "No, I didn't hear anything," and I just kept walking. And then I started fishing, and there was another snap. And she goes, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah, I heard that one." And but to me, it was a hog or a bear stepping on a branch, whatever. We're cognizant of the fact that it could have been something different. And I quit fishing. I didn't catch anything, and we decided to walk up that steep hill where we heard the snaps. I had a pistol with me. I wasn't really anxious or anything. And we walked up that hill, and I've never seen my wife at the whole time I've known her ever have a scared expression on her face. She has a calm demeanor about her, and in nature she's really calm. I mean, when I want to squash a spider on our cabin floor, she'll carry it out and throw it out in our front yard. That's her demeanor. Got up to the top of the hill, and I walked one way, and she kind of walked the other way, and I hear her go, "Rick, Rick," and I turned around, and I go, "What?" And she goes, "Don't run, don't run," and she had this blank look on her face. And when she said, "Don't run," I started running. I started running down that hill, and I said, "Hurry up!" That's all I said to her was, "Hurry up!" And I said, "What was it?" When I got to the bottom, she goes, "A bear growled at me up there." And unbeknownst to both of us, I seriously think it wasn't a bear. I think it was a creature, because since then, since we've owned the cabin, I've got pictures of all sorts of bears, and I've seen their scat. Their scat is just a puddle. There's no solidity to it. It's not like a log. It's just a puddle. And what I filmed on that video was right at the opening of that cove, and he must have just squatted down and just laid him down right there.
Now, didn't you also say that either across that cove or somewhere you might have seen what you thought were two bear up on a ridge?
I don't know if it was a shadow or what, but I never definitively could ever determine what it was. It was just to me it was more like a shadow, I think. But I will say this, and I don't know if it was that exact trip, because we used to go to that was one of our favorite spots to go. And I don't know if it was that trip exactly, but we went up on top of the hill one time, and this is in a real remote area, real remote, and we found the most unlikely thing you'd ever think you'd find up on top of that hill. It was a little bitty white baby shoe by itself.
Creepy.
Yeah. And
a baby shoe.
Yeah, just by itself. And this is like, you have to work to get to this place. And plus you have to climb up that hill also. But yeah, it's the only time I think that since I've known my wife, I've ever seen that blank, scared look on her face when she said, "Don't run." And I was thinking that was the wrong thing to say to me.
Well, you know,
I was thinking, I hope you're as fast as I am.
Well, you know, the fact that, you know, this was on the northern end of Broken Bow Lake, and you had what certainly sounds like to me probably close proximity to a Bigfoot. It's probably what growled at Darla. It was probably snapping tree branches, thinking it was hidden, and then all of a sudden when y'all split up, she's heading in the direction towards it, and it panicked. But anyways, the northern end of Broken Bow Lake, since 1969 or 67, somewhere a long time ago, David Hawley, as an 18-year-old young man graduating from high school, had an encounter on a small peninsula. They called it an island because when you looked at it from the campsite, it looked like an island, but it was still attached on the back side of the island, so it was more like a peninsula.
Right.
But anyways, and so they got to this island with a canoe. Well, anyways, now this is at the northern end of Broken Bow Lake, too, 40 years ago, or 30 years ago, or however long ago this happened. And David Hawley, they've been going back to this area ever since, and we've joined up with them for the past couple of years and spent time with them. Story of what happened when he was 18 years old. Apparently on this island, and this is not very far from where Rick is telling you about his cove. I mean, they've got to be very close.
Yeah, it's crow flies, I'm sure, just a few miles. Or less.
Well, anyway, so he David Hawley says that you know, they went on this island. He and his buddy climbed up to the top of this island and planted a flag, a rebel flag. You know, it's two 18-year-old boys in a canoe, you know, staking claim to this island, and you know, as young men would behave. And he said it was only then, when they got up to the top of this island, did they look around, and it was kind of a flattened off area up there where something had smashed down all the foliage, and it was kind of like using the top of that as a lookout type, you know, as an elevated observatory plateau or whatever. And he said he got a weird feeling, and you know, thought, you know, maybe there was a bear around or something. So they started going down the mountain, and something got in behind them and started following them, and it spooked them pretty bad. And they started running, and whatever was behind them started running, and he said they veered off the trail and didn't go down the same trail that they'd come up, and came to this ledge that was about 8 to 10 foot. And he said they just jumped down, and he was assuming that it was a bear behind them. And he said after they jumped down that 10-foot cliff and landed, and he said that was the only time that they stopped and turned around and looked up, because he felt somewhat safe with that kind of distance dropped.
Right.
And while he was looking up, he said that's when this big, huge, cone-headed gorilla looked over the edge at him. And he said they went into panic mode, running down, and they ran down, and this thing obviously jumped down after them and was following them, and they broke out of the tree line, and he said they were very close to where the canoe was, and they jumped in that canoe and launched it out and was paddling away. And he said this Bigfoot came all the way out into waist-deep water and was slapping the water at him. And that's David Hawley's story. But you really want to click on the link and listen to Dave tell it in his own words from that time frame. It's an interesting story, and just know that it is very close to lots of activity, lots of current activity, and a very, very active area.
Right. Right across there's the most northern boat ramp on Broken Bow Lake is right near our cabin, and if you just look across it's called lake, but actually it's the Mountain Fork River at that point. It doesn't really open up to the lake for a few miles, but right across the Mountain Fork River is the McCurtain County Wildlife Refuge, and it houses the red cockaded woodpecker that's protected by the state, I guess, but it's 17,000 acres of if you don't have permission to go over there, you're not allowed to go over there. But our biologist has a house right down the road from where our cabin is, and his name is John Skeen, and he took a picture. I'm sure he's not a Bigfoot advocate. You know, he's pretty much all science. He's a biologist. He took a picture of something he couldn't explain, and it was in the McCurtain County wilderness area of all this piled up, broken off boughs of cedar, just like 12 feet by 5 feet high. And none of his logger employees, he has employees that log over there that cut trees down, none of them ogged up to, tearing off branches and piling them up like that. And he didn't have any explanation for it, but I'm pretty sure I had an explanation for it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you guys have some other down that road that you guys live on. You've got friends and even a hunter, a guy that hunted somewhere in the woods back behind his place. I mean,
right.
Aren't they having some possible activity that even your friends are having that they may not admit to being Bigfoot, but it could
right.
be?
Yeah, the guy Chuck Lipinski that owns the resort just down the road from our cabin. He has a stand with a corn feeder for deer. He has a deer stand, and this is like 2 years ago. He said he was sitting in a stand, and across the river or the lake, he kept hearing wood knocks and howls, and he doesn't believe in Bigfoot. So so he had no explanation. He just told me what he heard, and I said, well, that's some of the common vocalizations and things that they do, but he's not gonna. He's a person just like a lot of people. They have to see the evidence or see the actual creature. I told him what it represented, and he just kind of shined it on like, well, whatever. But what he said, what he heard, I'm sure that's it's the same area, that exact same area across the river from where he was sitting. It's not 2 miles from our research area back then, our Bigfoot research area up on top of the mountain.
Yeah.
So it's you could virtually walk there. There was something going on there. I just wish that it had never got logged and we could still maintain our research. But it is what it is, and that's what happened. But fortunately, Darla's found another spot, and it's even better.
Yeah, I mean it is, but it's not. You can't guarantee. Well, you can't really establish any kind of baiting situation there because
right.
Too many people could possibly go down there.
Right, you're right.
But I mean, in retrospect, logging areas. I mean, there's places logged all the time. These animals aren't going anywhere. They may shy away from it, while it's being logged. But I'll bet you, it doesn't take just a couple of weeks for once the logging vehicles are out of there for them to reestablish their patterns.
Well, the only thing is about that is, if you log an area and there's deer in that area, the deer will leave, and then, like you said, 2 weeks later, the deer will return, and I've seen it happen. I go in our right where our deer lease is right now. I've seen it happen, but given that the creature needs that cover and that all the trees are pretty much gone, it's really, really just cleared out. He doesn't have that cover anymore. It's not thick with trees. So now, if you go down to Buffalo Creek, they never went down that far. That's still normal. Where I fished and I got whistled at, and or where I got the rock thrown at me, that's still normal. But you can't get down there now because they blocked all the 4-wheel trails. They purposely blocked it off.
So you and Darla ever think about maybe, I mean, just for grins and giggles, maybe going back up there and camping 1 or 2 nights and just seeing if there's anything going on?
Yeah, we absolutely have. It's just my work schedule is it's absurd. I mean, I work every day, and it isn't like before where I had the weekends off with Darla, and it was just, it was a common thing. We'd just get our weekends, we'd leave on a early Saturday morning, get up there and do our thing, but now she's by herself, and but we have discussed it. I mean, we'd like to go back up there, and the little campsite never got disturbed. That never got disturbed, but the trees, they're all cleared out, and if we wanted to get down to Buffalo Creek, we could get down there. It's no problem. We just have to walk it about a half a mile.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're still coming in from the mountain and going down to Buffalo Creek. I bet you if you're camped up there, I bet you they'd still come around and see what's going on.
As long as there's game down there, as long as there's hogs and deer, which there is, that's what.
So when I was there with you, and we went down to the creek. Remember, we had to cut that tree out of the way.
Right.
And so the creek wasn't that far away. So if there's a lot of cover down at that creek, I mean, even if they're traveling the creekways, I mean, it wouldn't be much of a stretch for them to just work their way up the hill to see what's going on up there, especially if they smelt a new batch of peanut butter or something.
That's true. Cook some bacon or do something to attract their curiosity.
Ladder that tree up with Jiffy. It's probably been a long time since we had some Jiffy.
Yeah, it's remarkable how they responded to that peanut butter. It's like, well, I think I helped them by, I'd unscrew it, take that seal off, that silver seal, dip it into the peanut butter, and then slap it against the pine trees as high as I could slap it, and just let it stick there and let the aroma from the peanut butter drift. And I don't know if that was the original attractant to them, but they caught on, and they were consistent. First one, and the second one lasted for a while. But we're really fortunate that we got that habitation to the one creature, and then the second one. And weird how you get desensitized, though. It's like,
yeah. Well, I mean, you've certainly got you've gotten more activity than a lot of people has ever gotten. So you guys are fortunate in that way.
Right.
Even though it didn't culminate in an actual sighting, which who knows how close you were to a sighting if you just followed through with with a couple of things like wherever the whistle was coming from, if you'd have went on over there. I mean, who knows? You might have caught the backside of one trying to get away from you.
Right.
But anyways, I think we've probably pretty much played out all that happened in your research area, and certainly the new area that Darla's working, and I can be a testament to how great that activity is, certainly open for future development with whatever family comes up along that little river. For me, getting to know Rick and Darla,
we've been good friends.
Has really meant a lot to me. If it wasn't for both of our interest in this subject, we would have never met. I mean, a lot of people. I wouldn't have met anybody if we didn't share this interest. And there's been such a good, strong, relationships built with people, and I'm sad that I would have never been able to be friends in any other medium. But I'm glad that we at least had this medium that opened it up for us, because I think you and Darla are great, and I appreciate the time that you guys have allowed me to spend with you down there. So, we'll just go ahead and just leave that at that.
We're exactly replicate that same feeling, Randy. We were just damn lucky we get to know you. We're just fortunate like that.